So I want to start this video by quoting from a news article that came out earlier on this month, the 8th of February, and it says, "Conviction by computer is go, confirms UK Ministry of Justice. Petty criminals in Britain will soon be found guilty and sentenced by computers under new government plans. Under this proposal, defendants who opt into the online procedure and plead guilty will be offered the option of accepting a predetermined penalty, including the payment of any appropriate compensation and costs. Under the sketchy details available in the consultation response, which is a PDF, the system appears to be designed so the guilty party clicks guilty on the screen and then makes a credit card payment online there and then." How does that sound? Sounds great, doesn't it? So no jury, no hearing of evidence, no argument or counter-argument, just a big red guilty button that you can press in an attempt to make sure that justice is accessible to all, which of course redefines the word justice. Oh God, beeping. You may have heard in the past that people have said things like political change during wartime can advance much quicker than it can during peacetime, and certain catalytic events can bring about radical change. And they have said in the reforms of the justice system that radical change is needed, and I personally think they are starting to use Brexit as that catalytic event to produce radical changes to the justice system, but just pursuing an age-old philosophy of restricting ordinary people from justice. Of course, not too long ago, the Supreme Court was asked to make a judgment on whether or not the Parliament was allowed to exit the European Union without taking a vote. It was very controversial. And of course the Supreme Court, as they would normally do, produced a document which was their judgment. It was 97 pages long. I'm not sure if you read it. I'm not sure really if anybody read it, especially the newspapers who were reporting on it. I'm not sure if they actually read it. When I read it, about four or five times, it really is quite illuminating as to what is really going on. So let's go down to the Supreme Court and let's talk about the capital T. Can you see the symbol of Omega, which was pointed out by a friend of mine to me? It's got the Omega symbol, which of course means the end, the final decision maker. Alpha and Omega. Now, in this Supreme Court judgment about Brexit and whether or not the Houses of Parliament over there were allowed to use the royal prerogative to exit the EU, the Supreme Court essentially said they couldn't because of the capital T in treaty. And of course a lot has been said over the years by various conspiracy websites that capitalisation extraordinarily important and significant, and the Supreme Court, known for being outrageous conspiracy theorists, seem to agree that capitalisation extraordinarily important. You see, the capital T on treaty, from EU treaty, means it's not actually a normal kind of treaty. The royal prerogative can be used to absolve any old treaty with a lowercase t, which is an agreement between two international bodies, generally countries. But a capital T meant that the EU treaty cannot be dissolved by the royal prerogative because it is domestic law. What the Supreme Court really managed to find out, just by really analysing it, was that at some point, whether it was in 1972 or 73, or whether it was later on in some of the other treaties like Maastricht or the Single European Treaty or any of those, at some point the United Kingdom ceased to exist as an independent nation and became part of a larger nation called the EU. And of course the Queen's jurisdiction, or the jurisdiction of the Crown, does not permeate throughout the entire country or super country, but only in the United Kingdom. It'd be similar to a mayor somewhere having jurisdiction over their own town and not having jurisdiction over the entire country. It's a regional jurisdiction. And this is where the shenanigans can really begin, because you can argue that when the UK separates from the EU, it won't so much be just withdrawing from a treaty, it will be partitioned into a new country that is separate from the larger one. And this really is where all the shenanigans can really begin, because constitutionally, when you're forming a new country, you can come up with new rules. Did you know that the House of Parliament is going to be heavily renovated? The entire thing is going to be emptied out, both houses. The House of Commons is going to become, or be housed, in the Department of Health, and the House of Lords will be housed in the Queen Elizabeth II Exhibition Centre. And this is a process that's going to take several years while they refit the Parliament in order for them to go back in. Is it just a coincidence that as we exit the European Union, both houses will be leaving the Parliament building, temporarily housed elsewhere, and when we, in a couple of years' time, when we've finally separated from Europe, they will go back in. It will be opened up by the Queen, and it's almost like they're pressing the reset button to begin running a new type of nation. It is my concern that with what we think will be more freedoms with Brexit, separating from a multinational, supranational, corporate, technocratic entity, will just be used as a catalysing event to further the philosophical game of human management, that we will in fact be presented with a new Bill of Rights and a new constitution when we form this new nation of the United Kingdom, and it'll be a plasticised version of what existed before. You must have noticed how odd it was that suddenly all the people who were so amazingly positive about staying in Europe, including the Prime Minister now, all of a sudden are completely changing their tune and really pushing for the hardest Brexit they could possibly achieve. It seems a bit odd, almost like they've realised an opportunity, a catalysing event that can really just bring about the ancient philosophy of plasticising freedom. Of course, a good example of this is the American Constitution. People say that it's one of the strongest examples of constitutional freedoms being declared through law. And they say that it's the American Constitution is based upon the ancient freedoms of England. But if the ancient freedoms of England were real, why wasn't England good enough? Why do they have to flee over to the New World to escape the tyranny of England. It's because England has always just had a plasticized, imaginary simulation of freedom whilst running what is essentially a free-range human tax farm. I mean, this is really something that's been going on for a very long time. You could say that the very idea of trying to incorporate us into a European system was a way to push forward the agenda of degrading the ancient rights of this country. Of course, what has happened now, in almost like a counter-revolutionary strategy, because the people want out of Europe, they're just going to use that opportunity to radically push forward the same agenda, which is to plasticize the system of justice and prohibit ordinary working people from being able to access justice. So when Theresa May says we're going into a new era, she is correct, because they are pushing radical constitutional change through Brexit that will completely redefine what we think justice is and what we think about as freedom.